Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for the opportunity tonight to present the colors by the Oneida Nation Veteran Affairs Committee. You don't need to stand at affecting the flag at this point. We'll start in a minute. I just want to give a couple more announcements. Our Oneida Nation Veterans Affairs Committee is made up of 9 members of veterans who have served honorably and been discharged from one of the or more of the 7 uniformed services. Our color guard is appointed by our committee is appointed by the Oneida Business Committee. And our intent and our work within our community is to continue to provide services and assist the Veteran Service Office, which we have in Oneida, to support the veterans and their families. The color guard is an honorary thing. We've done 2 virtual presentations since January, where we filmed ourselves, and then one is for a powwow in St. Louis at the Washington University, which will take place in March 17th and 18th. But we're really pleased to be here tonight. I'd like to introduce each of the flag carriers. The United States flag is carried by Floyd Hill of the United States Army. The Oneida Nation flag is carried by Dale Webster, United States Army. The Wisconsin state flag is carried by Ken House, United States Air Force and the United States Navy. And the POW flag is carried by Art Cornelius, United States Air Force. Color guard, 10, hip. Right, haste. Forward, hooch. Color guard, halt. Left, haste. Present colors. Please join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Order, colors. Right, haste. Right, haste. Post, colors. Left, face. Forward, hoop. Color guard, halt. Dismissed. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, please be seated. So in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to give you an update on our goals that we've been working on for the last year. So first goal was filling some key positions to include some vice president positions, 2 of those, as well as the director of programming. So those positions have been filled. We've had a total of 6 volunteers to do some other additional things within the club, like ROTC liaison and some work with the website. Another goal that we're working on, I think is very important, is to improve the Military Officer Club awareness of Northeast Wisconsin. We actually operate in 20 different counties in the state. Starts from Sheboygan, goes over to Sheboygan, sure. Includes Outagamie County, Oshkosh, and all the way up to the UP to include Wausau and that border. So there's 20 counties in this part of the state, and we're under what's called Chapter 105, and there's 20 in our particular area. So One of the areas we are looking for is a communications or public relations person. We're trying to make things more aware for the people of our area to know who and what the Military Officers Club of Wisconsin is all about. So it's improving awareness. So we're working on our websites. We're going to start to use social media, LinkedIn, Facebook. We already have a Facebook page. We need to develop some material that we can give out to people, like trifolds. You've seen where somebody hands you something and tells you something about their company. We need to develop these things so we can get it in some of the various VSO offices, or anybody who wants to know more about the club can, in fact, we have something to pass out to them. So the other thing is obviously radio, TV, print, and other forms of communication. So like tonight, it'd be great to put something in a newspaper saying we had this meeting, a picture, and talk what happened about Mr. Mino and what he spoke about. We just don't have anybody to write this kind of information for us and then coordinate it with the various newspapers and media. So that to me is one of our biggest challenges, to get that taken care of. And if we increase our awareness, we'll increase membership, which is another one of the goals. At the close of 2019, we had 126 members. At the close of 2020, we had 130. Today, we're up to 131. This gentleman joined us, so yay, that for that. One of the big things that the club has been working on the last 7 years is something called the VGBO. And this is the goal that actually started 6 years ago. The 7th year was last year, and this is the 8th year. But the whole idea of this Veterans Gulf Benefit outing is to raise money for veterans and groups in primarily in our 20-county area, not for the state, but in our areas where the money stays. In 2019, when we had the Gulf outing, we raised $85,000. The various donors contributed $85,000. And I want to point out, anything somebody gives us is 100% given to the veterans, okay? What pays for the actual Gulf Day is the members themselves, not the members, but the people who Gulf, actually, they have to pay a fee. That pays for their carts, the green fees, as well as their dinner. So everything that costs money, somebody else pays for. The only money that the veterans get, all the money that is donated to them, which is 100%. So the next thing that we're working on is we've happened in 2020, I'll get it straight here, in 2020, was even though the outing was canceled, our donors realized that the veterans still needed money. So the donors donated $86,000 this year. That's more than the year before when we had the Gulf outing, because they believe in the veterans needing this money, especially in difficult times like this. So. And it goes to 6 different organizations that work with veterans throughout the county, and not our county, throughout the 20-county area. So this is a great thing. Now, September 13th is this year's Gulf outing. I would like to hope we're going to increase more than the $86,000, but I don't want to bet on how high we could go. But, you know, 6 figures would be good, round it off, and that'd be a great goal to go for. Another thing that I've been trying to work on with the board is developing a platform to allow all members to participate in committee meetings, not committee meetings, but in meetings like this. Most of the people are concentrated in the immediate area between Appleton, Green Bay, a little bit over towards Wausau. That's the majority of our members are, and that's the majority of the people come from. But we have people in Oshkosh, we have people in Sheboygan, we have people up in Marinette. They don't always come to the dinner meetings, especially in the wintertime because of distances. So one of the things we've worked on doing is putting together virtual meetings. And the board now meets most of the time using virtual meetings. And tonight is the first time we're actually live streaming this particular part of the program to all our members. So people who can't make it here, could not make it here, we sent the links out to them, and they can either watch it on YouTube, Facebook, or on the website. This is going to be a heck of a good thing, I think, for getting more people to come down and say, hey, we want to come down here. Speakers like John Mino, we want to see what's going on over here. But the only way we can do that is to show them what's happening. So I think we're off to a good start on that. Now, you'll find a document on your tables, and it looks very similar to this and I'm going to talk about it for a few minutes. This is our strategy for 21-22, as you can see on the top. The board has put this together, and I'll go through this briefly to give you an idea how this works. On the left is what we call the means. It's the program committee, the communications committee, legislative committee, outreach committees, Gulf, and so on down. And all those committees are responsible for the social events, which are the horizontal lines across here. Social events, keep our members informed, support community veterans, retain and recruit members, and sustain the organization. And at the right-hand side at the ends, well, if we're successful, if the events are well attended, camaraderie, the members get to know their benefits and pending legislation. We support veterans in a strong defense. And obviously support MOA's aims and objectives, and grow membership. And if we do that, you'll see in that darker green part there, that means we've been successful. So this is the first year of this 2-year program that we're working on. That gives you an idea of what the club as a whole is trying to do for the people who are club members, as well as veterans. And obviously that's some of both. So one thing I also want to mention is that to be a member, you don't have to be retired. Any officer in any branch of service is welcome to join the club whenever they want. All they have to do is fill out the forms. So I just briefly want to say that our next meeting is going to be in June 10th, and that's going to be another great meeting because Dan Emmerman has put together a great interactive detective show, as we call it. It'll be June 10th down at the Hyatt in Green Bay. So with that, I'm going to turn the podium over to Dan.
Thank you. So I have the honor this evening to introduce our guest speaker, John Mino. So he's very famous, of course, in the community. Famous TV, radio personality. Also a realtor. So if anybody's in the market for a house,
I got cards.
He has cards. See, John.
Cards.
Yeah, definitely.
And I dropped 1 full commission point for any veterans. So think about that, cha-ching, cha-ching, right here in this room tonight. We'll talk.
Yeah. And he also does a lot of work in our community, supporting a lot of good causes. Where I know John best from, of course, is his support for the military. And not only when I was commanding the 432nd Civil Affairs Battalion in town, he was a frequent visitor there, just lending his support to the soldiers when they were returning from deployments or going to deployments. He also, he's been almost to combat zones as often as I have. So he's had he's embedded 3 different times with soldiers overseas in both Iraq, Afghanistan. Was it 2 trips to Iraq?
To Iraq, 1 Afghanistan.
Yeah, 2 to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan. So he puts his money where his mouth is in terms of going out there and going into harm's way and visiting our troops and building morale. He's also an accomplished author. He's written, I think, 4 books now, and he's working on a 5th. It's a Frontline series of books about veterans in the Wisconsin area that served it's a series of short stories of veterans in Wisconsin that have served during World War II. There's also one specifically targeted towards serving in the European theater and one on the Pacific theater. And he's working on a new book here that has more interviews in it from Korea, Vietnam, and also some additional World War II ones, I believe. So with no further ado, it's now my pleasure to introduce John Mino. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here, and I really and truly mean that from the bottom of my heart. Any type of a group like this to be able to speak to, it's truly an honor. So many times, just to give you a little background, so many times people ask me, how did you get so involved with the military? We thought you were really big in sports. Well, it's a little bit of both. I grew up with 3 brothers who are older than me, who all served 3-year hitches in the Army. One was an MP, one worked at White Sands Missile Base. He was a Spec 5 there, and another one was a radio operator. So we had and they all enlisted. So we had a 9-year span in the 60s with a member of our family being in the military. So just being around those guys, just seeing those guys even coming home for Christmas or Thanksgiving or anything like that in their uniforms, that was just so impressive. Just to see that, your brother in uniform like that, it really made a big impact on me. So that's how I first got started with it. Then in the media-wise, and I've always just been a big history buff. Love reading history, watched all the movies, numerous times. And back in the mid to late 90s, with one of my radio shows, we decided on Veterans Day to hold a breakfast for veterans, a free breakfast. And that was just so much fun, and you get to sit down and know these guys. And at that point, it was a large percentage of World War II veterans. And back then in the mid-90s, there really weren't as many, how do I put it, places for veterans to go on Veterans Day. I mean, now it's great. I mean, so many restaurants give free breakfasts and free lunches and things like that. But back then, there really weren't that many. There were a few ceremonies, but this was unique in that, the guys could all come there and talk amongst themselves. One guy might be from Europe, another one from the South Pacific. But I'd be sitting there and just listening to these guys and talking with these guys. And again, I read, as many books as I possibly could. And I'm hearing their stories, just sitting next to somebody. It's like, wow, this story is every bit as compelling as something I read from Stephen Ambrose or someone like that. And I thought to myself, okay, I can't write like Stephen Ambrose. I'll be the first one to tell you that. But what I can do, I think, is converse with a guy and just take his story down and put it on paper. And that's what I do. So when people call me an author, that's great. But I don't feel like I'm an author. I feel like I'm just more of a documenter, where I'm just documenting these people's stories. Because every word in there, it's their own words. It's not my words. It's their words. So that's what I've always tried to do. And some of these guys were just remarkable. And the thing that I've really tried to really get across to people, especially when I talk to kids at schools, some guy that might run the little dairy farm down the street from you in Denmark or Maribel or Francis Creek or, Pound, you just look at him as this, this guy who is a dairy farmer. Well, you don't know that when he was 19, 20 years old, this guy parachuted with the 82nd Airborne or the 101st Airborne into Normandy. Or this guy stormed the beaches of Tarawa or Iwo Jima. And what I try to do is let people know that you got the Hollywood facade of veterans, the John Wayne facade, that whole thing, and that's all great. That's entertainment. But the real guys that did battle were these guys living down the street from you, who you might not look at right now as being an American hero, but they were. When they raised their right hand and said they're willing to put their life on the line, they meant it. I mean, their lives were on the line, and everybody here did that. Every person in this room, basically, not except me, because I was a chicken, every other person said, yeah, I'm ready, willing, and able to put my life on the line for my country. And that's so admirable, and I want to get that across to younger people, especially in schools, that these elderly people you see, you have no idea what they did when they were at a younger age. And that, to me, has been the most fulfilling aspect of the whole thing, is for some of these guys to give them a new persona, so to speak, with people. As Daniel mentioned, I did have the opportunity, and it was a distinct honor to go overseas 3 times. Twice to Iraq, once with the 432nd, at an amazing place, Camp Liberty. Although I always get, is it Camp Liberty or Camp Victory? I never knew where I was.
They're right next to each other.
They're right next to, so I didn't know where, I was lost the entire damn time. I'm just saying. But it was just remarkable. And one of the things, a civil affairs battalion, and this is something that I came away from the experiences that I had no idea about beforehand. You'd watch the nightly news, and you'd watch the media, and you would have these videos of these guys in the full body armor, and they look like, G.I. Joes, kicking in doors and, carrying the M4s or the M16s and the whole thing, and you got the big MRAPs and the Humvees and those kind of things. And that's this persona of these big, indestructible people. Well, when I went over there, one of the things I did was I brought a whole bunch of Packer t-shirts, Brewers t-shirts, UWGB, Wisconsin. I brought a bunch of just stuff like that they were allowed, if they're inside the wire and they're kind of off duty, they were allowed to wear some of that casual stuff at times. And what it gave you was that visualization and realization that they're just young kids that should be, cutting the grass at their mom's house or, working at Festival Foods or whatever. We send such young people to war. And when they're all kind of hidden behind that body armor, you lose that perspective. You lose that perspective that these are really, really young people doing really, really amazing things. And that's what I really took away from those trips. How young these people were and the amazingly responsible, courageous jobs they did. Another thing I took away from it that I try to harp on with every time I speak someplace, it's incredible the job that female armed forces people do. It's incredible. I know there was a thing a few years ago about how they weren't going to be on the front lines. Bull crap. When you're in Iraq or you're in Afghanistan, you could be at Camp Liberty and you go outside that wire and you start heading down Route Irish on the way to Baghdad. If there's a more dangerous, foreboding front line anywhere in the world, I don't know where it was. And these young women on a daily basis went out into enemy, hardcore enemy territory. And they dealt with these people, these civilians, in such a tremendous manner you can't believe it. And I feel like that story has never been fully told. The role of the female soldier, Marine, sailor, Air Force veteran, with a job they've done is just incredible. I was so fortunate one amazingly hot day, Sunday morning, to go out with a group from the 432nd. Christy Van Lannen, that whole bunch. And these young ladies, God bless them. I don't know if you're supposed to talk about, weight and things like that these days, but I swear not one of them weighed over 105 pounds, and they carried minimum 75 pounds on them. And it was about 120 degrees, and we went to this little village. And I went in, I remember trying to talk to some of the women that were there for this big meeting, and they wanted nothing to do with men. They wanted nothing to do with American men. Anyway, they just had the whole thing would just kind of shun you. And Christy and a couple of other girls come walking out. These little kids that had been hiding behind their moms, behind the big ropes, they peered their heads out, and I'll never forget the look in their eyes, the expression. And they came running out and just jumped towards these female soldiers like you've never seen before. And the whole thing went from terror in their eyes to just exhilaration, seeing these young American women that were there to help them. And the amazing job that Christy and her fellow troopers did with them was just incredible. And you had to see it to believe it. And I don't think the media has ever done a good enough job to give those young women the credit that they deserve. They had such an amazing role over there, and they performed it so admirably. The other thing I came away from with my trips is the incredible amount of time our service people in a war zone spend helping civilians. It was incredible. They would help these people like you can't believe at every opportunity. And one guy told me that his wife had been a school teacher back in the United States. So he had her send a bunch of those kind of workbooks that you would pick up and, different things. And I'll never forget this. He had her send some of those old-fashioned stick-on stars. And I didn't even think they made those anymore. I mean, we had those back at, St. Paul's Junior High in Negaunee, Michigan in 1968 type of thing. And Mrs. Betts is nodding because she knows that. She's from the UK. She had those too up at home. I mean, they're all Finlanders up there, but they still went to school, right? So I'll never forget, the guy said they'd hold these classes and he'd have the kids do some work. They were trying to teach them English and different things. And when he would go back, he would give them assignments. He got notebooks, he got pens, all sorts of stuff like that. He'd give them assignments. And the next time there was going to be a class, he'd hold these. No matter how early he got there, he said kids were already standing in line. And the reason was they wanted to see what color star they got. And he realized that's the only thing they had going on in their lives that gave them a sense of accomplishment, a sense of achievement. And it doesn't matter how young you are. That meant such a big thing to these young kids, that the color of that star was such a big thing in their lives. And that's what you realize when you go to these countries like that. Kids are kids, and kids want to learn. Kids want to have a great childhood. And the Americans went over there, and they went into dangerous, dangerous areas and did these kinds of things. Places like Sadr City, which might be the worst place on the face of the earth at the time. The worst place on the face of the earth. And they would go in there, civil affairs battalions. These kind of people, his people, would go into these places that were so scary, it was incredible. And they wouldn't just go in and run out. They would live there. They would take over some buildings and live there. And you want to talk about just being in the heart of enemy territory, and they did it because they wanted to show a presence. So the thing I really realized that opened my eyes so much, you don't have to be that warrior charging the machine guns on Iwo Jima. You can be a civil affairs person and go into enemy territory and do a job that is so important, it's mind-boggling, and face danger and suffer casualties like you can't believe. So those are the things I really took with me. That and the fact that I try to tell kids how good they have it over here, having seen what kids have over there. I remember one time we're coming through the desert. This was outside of Nasiriyah, and it was June 6, 2003. And I was with the 127 of the 32nd Division. And amazingly hot day. And we're traveling this convoy, and it's all dust and dirt and everything like that. And I remember we went to a place called the Temple of Ur, which was really cool. It was one of the oldest structures on the face of the earth. And we're driving through I remember I took an oven thermometer with me because the guys wanted to know how hot it really got, because all the thermometers just said 120. So I put it on, it was 132 degrees that day. And we're driving through the desert. There's this little girl, beautiful little girl, in a very colorful dress, big curly black hair, sitting there alongside the road, getting covered with dust. So I told the guys, I said, hey, can we stop just for 1 second? I said, could I give her something? I brought her like Beanie Babies and heart candies and things like that. And one of the guys said, give her a bottle of water. She'd appreciate that more than anything. I'm like, okay, great. So we stopped, and they said, we got to hurry, though. We can't, So, okay, so I dropped the window, and I kind of motioned to her, and she came over, and I wanted to take a picture. I was giving her this bottle of water, and I wanted to take a picture. She grabbed that bottle of water, and she turned so fast. It was like incredible. And I literally couldn't click. I got a picture of like this backside of her head. And she started walking away, and she started picking up rocks, like fairly hand-sized rocks. And one of the things the guys had told me before we went on that convoy was, if you see kids with rocks in their hands, let us know. Because a lot of times some of these guys, these younger kids, they'll throw rocks at the guys. And back then, with those Humvees, the top gunner was only about this high, was only protected about this high. Now they've got lots more protection with the MRAPs, the different things that came out. But like people on the overpasses, if they threw rocks, I mean, these kids, these young soldiers would get some very serious injuries from kids throwing rocks. So I said, hey, I don't know why she's going to throw rocks. And one of the guys said, nah, don't worry about it. I said, well, no, I can see it from where I am. She's collecting an armful of rocks, good-sized rocks. Why is she going to do that when we did something nice for her? And one of the guys said, that's not what she's doing. I said, okay. I said, what are you talking about? And he pointed down there. He says, look at that. And there are 3 boys, probably between 12 or 13 years old. He said, they saw you give her that bottle of water. As soon as we go, they're going to come and try to take it from her. She's going to try to fight them off with that pile of rocks. And I've showed that picture to kids in schools around Northeast Wisconsin. And I said, I don't care what kind of a bad day you're having. Let me tell you something. This little girl is literally going to fight to the death for a bottle of water. How rough do you have it? And that's what those kids over there go through. It happens in Afghanistan, happened in Iraq. These poor little kids, they just broke my heart. I wanted to do anything for them. And you realize they're just kids. One of the trips, we brought over a bunch of, actually it was outside of Baghdad. And we brought, we had Humana donate some computers. And when we got there, the computers were already there. We saw the boxes and everything, and they were going to do the first computer class. Well, they couldn't. I was doing video. I was going to do a thing for Channel 5, I think it was. And they said, you can't show the girls. You can't show their faces. I'm like, why not? They said, well, I said, it's for Channel 5 in Green Bay. I said, no, if that gets on the internet, you have no idea if they recognize some of those girls, what could happen to their families and things like that. I mean, that's how tenuous it was. So the translator then told the girls, they said, they're about 13 years old, 14, 15 even, and they were so excited about computers. okay? And the translator said, listen, this gentleman is not military, he's not government, he's entertainment basically where he's from, and he wants to know if you guys have any questions about America that he could answer, you know, nothing about the war, just anything. Anybody curious about America? And all the girls were so afraid they just sat there like this. I mean, okay. Then finally one girl raised her hand. And the translator says, yes. And the girl asked her the question. And the translator kind of said, okay. I said, what'd she say? She says, she would like to know if, in your opinion, Britney Spears and K-Fed will ever get back together. Swear to God. And it's like, you know what? Teenage girls are teenage girls. It doesn't matter where you are. And that's what's so cool about our people going over there and helping those people. And that's the part I took away more than anything. Another thing I took away from those trips was the amazing resolve, determination, toughness, whatever you want to call it, of our wounded troops. Had a great opportunity to go to Walter Reed Hospital twice. And both times we brought autographed Packer jerseys and iPods and different things like that. And we went into Ward 57, which is a really amazing place. It's the therapy room for Walter Reed Hospital when they were getting very, very serious casualties. And I talked to some of these guys. And I talked to kind of the therapist first and everything. It's like, can I talk to him? Is this okay? And they're like, sure, this one's good. You know, stay away from that one. So I was talking to this one young man. I remember it was 10th Mountain Division, which took a lot of casualties over there. And I said, hey man, how you doing? Heard you're doing great in therapy and everything's good. I said, we got a jersey for you. He goes, man, I'm down. I'm sick to my stomach. I said, well, I heard you're doing great though, man. You're gonna be able to get a job and everything. He goes, oh, I'm not talking about me. I go, I'm sorry, what are you talking about? He goes, I'm just so bummed that I'm here and not over there. I go, but I mean, you're safe, you're getting great treatment. He says, screw that. He said, they need me over there. I got a guy in my squad, he's a knucklehead. I gotta watch over him all the time. Nobody's doing it now. I got another guy, he's the squad leader. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's gonna get everybody in trouble. I gotta get back. To a man, every guy I talked to, their biggest regret was that they weren't over there with their guys. These are guys that faced death in the face, in some cases almost died, and their only regret and complaint was that they weren't with their guys because their guys needed them. That said something about the American warrior right then and there. Then we went to a place that I will never forget, the intensive care ward at Walter Reed. And this lady had contacted me from Fond du Lac. And she said her son had taken a round, he was a gunner in a Humvee, and taken a round right through the forehead and survived, which was amazing. And they weren't sure if he was going to survive, but she said, hey, could he get a jersey anyway? I said, absolutely. So we go into intensive care, and this poor young man, he's got tubes coming out of all over and everything. And she put the jersey on him. She's like, AJ, this gentleman is from Green Bay, and he's got a Packer jersey, and you're such a hardcore Packer fan. He's giving it to you. And she's like, AJ, can you give me a sign that you can hear us? And he kind of squeezed her hand a little bit. And then the nurse came in and said, okay, guys, you got to go. Time's up. So, okay. So she said, hey, would you guys all just say a little something to him before you leave? And we all said, sure. So it was Mark Green, the representative, who was with us, and some other people. And everybody, wished him luck. Well, the one thing I came away from being with people in a war zone more than anything else, the one thing amongst troops, the more you love a guy or a person, the more crap you give them. And the less nice you talk to them. Okay? So I thought, well, it's worth a shot. So I leaned down and said, hey, AJ, as soon as you're through milking this, we're going to get your fat ass up to Lambeau Field. I said, we're going to fill you so full of Budweisers and bratwursts, we're going to have to carry you out of there. Okay? His mom said, he squeezed. About 4 months later, I get a phone call at home. He goes, is this Mr. Mino? I go, yes. He goes, where are they home? My bratwursts and Budweisers. Ted Thompson used to give us his private box. We had him up there on Veterans Day, ironically, for a Packer game. Bounced back from that, was planning on going to law school, again, the resolve of these young warriors is just incredible, just incredible. And that's why I find those trips over there just be so, they've changed my life in the view of the American warrior. The World War II veterans, as I mentioned, incredible guys. And one thing I always want to talk about is I think the most untold story of World War II, the most untold important story of World War II totally concerns a bunch of young men from Northeast and throughout Wisconsin and the UP. And that's the 32nd Division. This was a National Guard unit, okay? This was during the height of the Depression when they signed up. These guys would do drill once a month. And the main reason some of these guys did it was because they got $1 cash every time they showed up for drill at the armory or the high school gym. And I told the guys, I said, is it worth $1? And he said, you know what? In 1939 or whatever, that was 20 beers. It's like, okay, I guess I can see that. But what these guys weren't expected was to be sent in one of the most hostile places on the face of the earth. Early World War II, Japanese running ramshod throughout the South Pacific. Australia was going to be the next big conquest. If the Japanese got Australia, the entire South Pacific was in jeopardy. That would have been their biggest thing. We would have been in serious trouble, and it would have been doubts as to whether or not we could come back. So he took a bunch of young National Guardsmen from Wisconsin. And at first they were going to send them to Europe. Then MacArthur said, no, I need people to go and try to defend Australia. They sent them to New Guinea, which was just a terrible, terrible, terrible place. And you had the Imperial Japanese there who were amazing. And they sent these young guys into the most inhospitable conditions. Malaria was rampant. They didn't have good equipment. It was horrific. And they went up against the Japanese, who were on their way going through New Guinea to get to Port Moresby, and then they're just going to leapfrog right into Australia and take over Australia. So I just want to read an excerpt of a couple of guys from Oconto who were in that area, and they were just young National Guardsmen. It was an area called Buna of New Guinea. One of the gentlemen's name was Amos. Remember my friend Amos? Chuck, you remember Amos Truckee? Amos Truckee in Red Lane. And there was an Oconto detachment from your area right there, Chuck. And these guys were sent to. I just want to read a little bit about this. This is from Red. The terrain around that area they called the Triangle was horrible. Thick jungle, kunai grass, and you couldn't see through it. The Japanese bunkers were hidden all over the place. That's what we had to go against most of the time. This is Amos. It was on Christmas Day that we walked up to our assigned area, and the first person I saw was a friend from Oconto. He was walking with a couple of medical people to the aid station. The muscle in his arm was all torn up, and he was bleeding pretty badly. That was my first impression of battle, seeing a friend from my hometown torn up like that. One day on a patrol, we noticed we were missing a man. The sergeant told me to go back and try to find him. While I was gone, the captain led a second squad into the jungle to find him. They ran into a bad situation. 6 of the guys were killed. If they hadn't sent me to find the missing man, I would have been there. You just wonder why in the hell you got spared. You wonder how a couple of guys you were just talking to, just standing right there next to you, how something like that can happen so quick. The nights were black, just pitch black. You couldn't see anything in front of you, and most of the time it was raining, so you couldn't really hear anything. You didn't know if the Japs were 2 feet away from you. We were supposed to change watch every 2 hours, but you couldn't tell what time it was. You certainly weren't going to light a match to check your watch. The way I did it was to practice saying the rosary for 2 hours during the day. How many times I went around, then at night I would say the rosary for 2 hours. This is Amos. We patrolled every day in the jungle. We'd walk with 3 squads and just keep walking until somebody spotted a bunker or the Japanese spotted you, which is usually the way it happened. The only way to knock out those bunkers was to drop grenades in them. It seemed like a lot of those guys who went out to do that never came back. You can say they did it because they were brave, but nobody thought about being brave. You just thought that with every bunker you knocked out, fewer of our guys would get killed. I remember the day Red got a hold of 3 new toothbrushes. My buddy Eddie and I were so excited, we shared that one toothbrush. A little thing like that might not seem like much, but it was really something. Later that day, Eddie got killed. He was just a really nice man. We went into New Guinea with a full company of 250 men. When they pulled us off the front lines, only 28 of us were able to walk out. And they won that battle. These guys, these young kids from the farms of Oconto County, and other places like that in Wisconsin and the UP, they won that battle, and they turned the tide against the Japanese expansion. And I think that story has never been said well enough, has never been done well enough. Korea. Boy, I'll tell you what. You want to talk about some things in Korea. Gentlemen that went through terrible, terrible times, who saw terrible, terrible things, got no credit when they came back. It's just amazing. I want to share one story. This gentleman's name is Larry Epsch. If anybody here is from Marinette, Menominee area, you know Larry. He spent almost 70 years as a writer and a sports writer up in the Menominee, Marinette area. In Korea, he was a medic. I just want to read a little bit about what he went through and what he did as far as helping local people. The patrols could be pretty brutal. I didn't have to go on any night patrols, but sometimes we would send a medic out with them if they thought they might be heading into a tough situation. There were usually 9-man patrols. They'd be sneaking around out there in total darkness, the only light coming from the artillery overhead. They'd go out trying to find the enemy's location in the dark, and oftentimes we'd get too close, there'd be a pretty good skirmish. Aside from the wounds, we also had to contend with brutal winters. Frostbite was a terrible thing. Sometimes you'd pull their socks off and the skin would come right off with them. It's something you can't get out of your mind. Those things are always going to be in your mind. I know there are now a lot of treatment centers for things that stay in your mind like that, and I know there are war veterans who have terrible memories that haunt them. In fact, I have a friend at the residence I now live with who was a sniper in Korea. Every time we start talking about the war, he starts crying. I was fortunate enough to have some good treatment, but nevertheless, you still think of those things, and privately you say a prayer. That's just the way it was. Now, this is something he wrote that actually ended up in the book, what's it called? Chicken soup for the veteran soul, right? Okay. This is from Larry, something that he actually did. Winters in Korea were brutally cold, but as Christmas approached in 1952, we were warned by the care packages from home that began to arrive. They weren't much. Home-baked bread and cookies, candy, chewing gum, reading materials, a few personal items, anything that could survive a trip of a few thousand miles. But just being able to open a package from home and read the letter inside lifted our spirits immensely. Christmas Day arrived, and after our somewhat half-hearted celebration, my thoughts turned towards the children in the local orphanage. They had no family or gifts, and though I knew they were in good hands with the apostolic sisters who ran the orphanage, I kept thinking everybody deserves a Christmas, no matter where they live. Let's go visit those kids at the orphanage, I suggested to my buddies. Surely we could scrounge up something to give them. They agreed, and the 4 of us rounded up some Spam and crackers from our supplies and wrapped the cookies, candy, gum we'd been sent from home in old newspapers we found around the hut. We jumped into one of our ambulances and drove to the orphanage, a converted school building somewhere near Konjo. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into and hadn't really thought much about it beyond the fact we just wanted some kids to be happy at Christmas. We couldn't call ahead to tell the nuns we were coming, but we hoped they would approve of our surprise visit. Of course they did. When we finally arrived at the orphanage, they took one look at us with our arms full of presents and began hugging and kissing us and crying, pulling us along. They led us to a large room where the boys and girls of various ages, from toddlers to kids about 8 years old, were eating a meager meal. When the children saw us, their faces lit up. Visitors, GI, GI, they squealed. They surrounded us as we handed out the crudely wrapped parcels. The room filled with the cries of excited delight. Then the nuns asked us to sit down so the children could give us something. The sisters had apparently taught the orphans a few simple Christmas carols, for they began singing with enthusiasm. We sat spellbound, tears running down our faces as we listened to their sweet singing. Their voices carried us home, far away from the discomfort and hardship that surrounded us. Then it was time to leave, and as we stood, the children crowded around us again, tugging on our pants, hugging our legs and crying, "Thank you, GI, thank you," over and over. We were so overwhelmed that we choked back more tears. Gently, we untangled ourselves from the children and made our way to the door. As we climbed back into the ambulance, I thought that by all accounts, this holiday should have been miserable, offering nothing but loneliness, bitter cold, some ragtag gifts, a few carols. But as we bounced along the road back to our barracks on the cold, long drive, the night seemed warm and full of promise. It seemed like Christmas. And again, no matter the war, our American troops did so much to help the civilians, and that's never really been told. And in Vietnam, in some of those villages, that happened as much as anywhere else in the world. There's a gentleman I know who was on a hill outside of Khe Sanh in January of New Year's Eve basically, of 1967, listening to the Green Bay Packers game in the Ice Bowl against the Dallas Cowboys on Armed Forces Radio. And he was so excited when he heard Bart Starr score that he leapt up in the middle of the night and yelled, and every guy in his bunker grabbed their M16, thought they were getting attacked. 2 weeks later, this outpost on top of this hill got overwhelmed like you can't believe. I mean, just overwhelmed with an incredible, incredible number of serious North Vietnamese troops. They held them off until morning, and it's literally a miracle he survived. A few nights later, he was on another hill, and they fought off another NVA attack that was incredible. 7 guys were left on top of the hill, and they said, well, you guys just got to dig in and spend the night. He knew he was going to die because the NVA would take those 7 guys and hopefully kill them quickly because they were dead. But courageous helicopter pilots of Vietnam, of every era. You got to be stones, man, to be a helicopter pilot, fly into that stuff. They went there and they rescued those guys as they were digging a foxhole, which he truly thought was going to be his grave. So if I can do this right now, that gentleman who was basically digging his grave that night is sitting right here. I'd like to bring him up for one quick second. Chuck Weldons, United States Marine Corps. Chuck, I talked about Iraq, Afghanistan, World War II, Korea. The Vietnam vet, your experience in Vietnam, can you sum it up versus what the media has told or books or movies have told? Can you sum up the experience being an infantryman right in the thick of the Vietnam War?
Yeah, it was quite a change in my life, so to speak. I joined the Marine Corps to see the world, and I got to see Vietnam. But I tell you, the camaraderie that you form with your fellow soldiers, and I'm sure many of you guys can allude to that, was remarkable. And it was just a year. We had a 13-month tour in Vietnam. I went just prior to Christmas of 1967, spent the whole year of 68 in Vietnam, and came home in 69. So I always say I've seen 3 years in Vietnam. Sounds pretty rough, but it was a 13-month tour. But the events that happened there, I can never forget, and I think the impact it had on my life is overwhelming. I consider myself an average soldier. I was an average soldier, an average person. So my story, it kind of reflects a lot of fellas had it a lot worse. But I lived to see another day, and a lot of my friends didn't, and they were wounded pretty bad. The war itself, it turned into perhaps fighting for the freedom of them people, and you could see as time wore on, it just wasn't happening. But as John said, if we could have got more in with the people of that, to instill in them what freedom meant. As years gone by, I really appreciate an event like this. I'm very fortunate John came into my life. Very honored to be part of his book. Never in my day I figured the only book I'd ever be in my lifetime would be a comic book or something. But it's certainly an honor, but I want to just say it's not about me, it's about your fellow soldiers. And the one that John talked about too, that's Amos Truckee. I was born, raised, and still live in the town of Stiles. And that's where Amos was from. Him and his wife operated a small restaurant just down the road from me. And I never realized until I read John's book. As you say, you don't know that. I didn't know that about John, about Amos. To me, he was just an older fellow, kind of bent over, shuffled around. And when you see what that man went through, it's remarkable. And I think a lot of veterans have that story. That person behind you in the checkout line at Fleet Farm or at the grocery store, he probably went through hell in his lifetime. But we all did it for one reason. Fortunately, I met a school teacher in O'Connell Falls. She was a high school teacher, and she taught civics class. And she taught about crisis of the 20th century. And she was about 10 years old when the Vietnam War was going on. So that was basically her war that she really remembered. And she invited some of us Vietnam veterans, when it came to that part of her class, to relate our stories. And I thought, nah, just an old man talking war stories to kids generations younger. But I went 7 times after that, and it was really an inspirational thing that these kids were so interested. Most of them were all seniors in what went on at that time. Obviously divided our country too. And I remember after about the first or second session, a young girl raised her hand at the end of the class, and she asked me, what is it that what lesson did you learn from being in Vietnam? And I just thought for a while, and I just said, how damn lucky I would be able to be born in this country. You see, John mentioned that too, the kids in these war-torn countries, the people, they run here, they run there, they get shot if they go here, they get shot if they go there. And it's just, it's a horrible, horrible experience to see that, and your heart goes out for them. You know, we knew someday if we made it, we'd at least get to come home again. But a lot of these kids, they had to live through that, you know. I mean, it just takes that away from them. And one other, I'll just sum this all up, that when I came into Vietnam, being in the Marine Corps, I don't know if any of you guys were in the Marine Corps, but you go through your basic training, you think you could take on the world and win. And you know, by the time I slowly, the trip over to Vietnam, you know, you got closer, you realized, I'm scared as heck, you know. And the night, we landed at night at Da Nang Air Base, and it was a commercial airline, so I'm sitting there, we were taxiing to get off, to disembark. I'm looking out the window, and there's a big transport plane with the back ramp down. And you know, I'm watching, all of a sudden here comes a forklift with a pallet full of flag-draped bodies. And it's a sight I can never forget, and that is why I will never kneel during the national anthem. Thank you all so much for having me here this evening.
Thank you, Chuck. One of the most poignant things you also told me is that night in the bunker when you realized you guys were being attacked, and the shock, no matter how well trained you are, where's my gun, where's my rifle, where's whatever, and you said you were physically shaking. You were so afraid, and you just thought to yourself, if a different color helmet appears in the doorway, I either kill him or he kills me. I mean, that's what it broke down to, didn't it?
Yeah, it's a horrible feeling when you realize that death was fairly close, because I could hear the North Vietnamese voices. It seemed funny. You just settle down and say, this is it, you know. And one of my friends always said, in that evening, luckily I had a good mentor with me. He took me under his wing and kept me from going totally berserk. But he was always, you know, the things got really bad, and then I started saying the Our Father. And every time we get in a bad situation, I'd say that prayer, and he looked at me and he says, why do you always say the Our Father? Most of the guys are screaming cuss words or something.
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to meet my maker.
That would have been good terms. The last time we talked was a good talk. Thank you so much for sharing that, Chuck. Thank you so much. And again, I'm not here to pump books or anything like that, because what I do with my books, and believe me, I don't make any money on them, because it seems like I give more away than I sell. But I just want future generations to know the great stories of these local people. And the Oneidas, God bless you guys. I've had numerous people from the Oneida Nation, Menominee Nation in my books, and you guys were badasses. And I mean that, because you walked point, you did dangerous missions, you guys were incredible. Cletus Ninem is in my next book. That's about the last guy I would have wanted to cross if I was a North Vietnamese back in about 1969. All the credit in the world for Oneida Nation, Menominee Nation, is what you people did for our country. It's really, really incredible. In regards to the book, it's not out yet, but if you want an order, I'm doing a pre-order, and if you want to order one, you don't have to pay me now, they're 20 bucks, I'll deliver it to you, but I'll sign it and everything like that. But what I did is I brought the names, the table of contents of all the gentlemen that are in the book. Like I said, there's 5 or 6 World War II, but a dozen Korea, and the rest are Vietnam. And as soon as this one's up and running, my next one is going to be on There's still some more Korean War vets I want to talk to, more Vietnam vets, and then I want to get into the Gulf War in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I want to have this man who was a Cobra pilot with the United States Marine Corps in the Gulf War right there. But you guys don't know, when I was in high school, I used to go every Saturday afternoon to watch this guy play football. This guy right here, for Northern Michigan University, won the national championship, and boy, what a thrill it was to go out and watch him and that Steve Mariucci and all those guys at Northern Michigan, and then he played for the Cowboys for a while and some other teams. So this man right here, he's the real deal when it comes to being an American. But I just want to say thank you all so much. Daniel, thank you so very much for asking me to come here. What an honor it is to speak with you people, and if there's anything I can do for you folks at all, please, I've got a bunch of my cards there. Not trying to pump real estate. It's just there. If you guys know of somebody that would be great for me to talk to for my future books and things like that, please take my card and give me a call anytime to let me know about that or anything I can do for you guys or the organization. I've talked long enough. Thank you all so very much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your story, Chuck. Really appreciate you coming in and talking to us. John, thank you very much for coming to speaking to the group. And I'm sure you can tell from John talking with you just how big of a heart he has for veterans. But what you might not know is when I called John and I said, hey, can you please come and speak at the Military Officers Club of Northeast Wisconsin? And he said, well, let's see, I just had my hip replaced. I'll see if I'm recovered by then. And then he called his doctor to figure out, okay, you think I'll be able to hobble in there and do that? And the doctor said, fine, and you can do that. But basically, went in above and beyond in terms of coming and speaking to us, and I'll certainly take a look.
Well, you said I get a free steak, so those are the magic words,
Yeah,
brother.
yeah.
Those are the magic words. Give me a free fill at any time.
Yeah, and I saw you running down the hallway. Your hip's doing good.
Well, that was to get the wine.
Okay, so I think we got some raffle winners. Joe, we got the 50-50 raffle.
Okay, we had $180 to be split 2 ways, so that's 90 each. Now, what I want to do is, I want to get somebody to pick this out, but guess who it's not going to be? John. Who do you think would be a good one, Jim?
All the good-looking women in here. The first
Okay,
one.
let's get women to do it. All right. No, yes, please. You're close. And the most honored. I'm trying to be. Okay, I have a witness here with Jim. And the number is, drum roll please. Okay, 213-6672. 213-6672. No. Okay, you're forgiven. Let's draw another one.
Pick another one.
Well, this is not.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
All right, we'll draw another one. I'm not going to take it, for heaven's sake.
I picked the right one.
Well, you did.
I know.
2136-909. 21. This is weird.
It is.
Is it?
Here's what happened.
Sorry. I'm glad I didn't pick it, Joe.
So that was okay, so that was, you got the
Yes, it was.
Congratulations, Vicki.
Did you say we need to do another drawing?
Nope, we're done.
Okay, we're done.
This is all tonight with a new city.
So,
Oh my God.
thank you again, John, for the great information. It was really courageous and good to hear the kind of things that go on in bad places. So that's great. I'd like to quick reminder, our June 10th dinner meeting, Dinner Detectives Mystery Show. Don't forget about that. That'll be a lot of fun. I also want to thank Nate Wisniewski for putting together the streaming tonight for the dinner program out on Facebook and YouTube and places like that. So I'll turn the podium over here to John in a second, and he'll talk to you about the casino things. But I just want to thank everybody for coming. It's good to be able to be getting this back on the road every 3 months, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great evening.
This casino outing is not a mandatory thing by any means. It's if you'd like a ticket, I'll be more than happy to provide it to you. Once again, if you do take a ticket, it's only good for tonight. You'll have to go into the casino masked and just go right down the hall and make a left and you'll run right into the casino doors. You'll have to go through the screening to take your temperature, and then you'll have to get a player's card if you do not have one. The player's card will be played until you earn 10 points. When you get 10 points on your card, then you can turn this back into the desk and they'll give you an additional $10 worth of points. If you want one, I'll be standing right here. You can just ask as you're departing. But I thank you. It's been an honor for us to be here tonight, and we've got a great group here. It's really an enjoyable thing to get engaged with. Thank you.
Great job. That was excellent.
Yes.